Baba Yaga's fingers hovered above the console, her gaze locked onto the holographic image of the Galactic Council. The transmission was crystal clear, but the message was anything but. They had betrayed humanity. Humanity's request for autonomy is denied, the counselor from the Akathar Dominion declared, his voice as cold as the black void outside their fleet's hull. You will disband your forces immediately. Any resistance will be met with annihilation. Yaga clenched her fists. A sharp pang shot through her chest. Betrayal had never tasted so bitter. Her people, who had fought and bled for peace, were now marked for extinction by those they had trusted. Madam Ambassador, a voice from behind her broke the silence. We've been given no time. The Council's forces are already mobilizing. Yaga turned to face Commander Jace Talon, her most trusted ally. Tall and built like a wall, his eyes carried the weight of too many battles fought. His hands gripped the back of the chair as though the simple act could steady him. The war was upon them, and they had only just learned. Commander, they've sealed our fate, Yaga said, her voice low but unwavering. The Council has made its decision. But I will not let them exterminate humanity. Talon nodded, his gaze flickering to the screens that showed the stars streaking past as their ship, the Valkyrie, raced away from the edge of the system. Their fleet, the last of humanity's unified forces, was scattered across the galaxy. But in their unity lay strength. In their will, defiance. The Alliance will rally, Talon said, his tone fierce. We'll gather our people. The Council might think we're weak, but humanity's never given up before. Yaga's hand ran through her dark, shoulder-length hair. She had trained for diplomacy her entire life, never anticipating she would have to be the one to lead her people into war. The weight of the galaxy seemed to crush her as she spoke, her voice thick with resolve. We don't have time to rally. The Council's forces are too vast. We need something more. We need to break their will. She strode toward the map of the galaxy projected on the wall. Stars glowed brightly, but the path ahead seemed shrouded in shadows. To the untrained eye, humanity was a speck, insignificant compared to the galactic powers that dominated. But Yaga knew better. The humans had something the Council never understood, tenacity. Prepare the fleet, she said, eyes narrowing. We'll strike first. Jace's expression hardened, a flicker of admiration in his eyes. A preemptive strike? Against their main fleet? Exactly. We'll take them by surprise. If we do this right, we can break their command structure. A galaxy-wide war could be avoided if we show them we're not to be dismissed. But, Jace hesitated, even if we strike, we'll only delay the inevitable. The Council won't back down. Yaga's lips twitched in a half-smile, the bitter taste of her thoughts lingering. True. But it'll buy us time. And it will send them a message. What message? Jace asked, his voice a mixture of doubt and curiosity. Run. Jace blinked, taken aback. Run? Yes. Yaga's voice was firm. The Council made one critical mistake, they underestimated us. I'm not asking for victory, Jace. I'm asking for a chance. She turned to him, her eyes burning with a fierce clarity. And that's something they won't expect. The atmosphere aboard the Valkyrie shifted, as if the very air crackled with the weight of the mission ahead. The crew, once uncertain, seemed to rally behind her resolve. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about showing the galaxy that humanity would not go down without a fight. Have the fleet ready in 1 hour, Yaga commanded, her tone brokering no argument. We'll make our stand. As she turned to leave the bridge, her fingers brushed the cold metal of the door. The lights flickered, casting long shadows against the walls. Outside, the stars offered no comfort, no answers. Only silence. Yaga's breath hitched for a moment, but she kept walking, her resolve hardening with each step. The Council thought they could erase humanity, but they were about to learn that humans didn't die quietly. Not anymore. Her people would fight, and if they fell, they would fall together. It wasn't just about survival. It was about forcing the galaxy to respect humanity. and in the darkened corridors of the ship, the last spark of hope flared to life. The cold hum of the engines filled the room as the Valkyrie cut through the void, streaking toward the farthest edges of human-controlled space. Baba Yaga stood at the front of the bridge, her gaze locked on the holographic display of their target, the heart of the Galactic Council's fleet. A massive concentration of warships was in motion, and humanity had no time to wait for reinforcements. They had to strike now, or face utter extinction. "We'll be within range of their advanced patrols in 30 minutes, Commander Jace Talon's voice cut through the tense silence, his eyes scanning the map as though every piece of information could mean life or death. Yaga didn't flinch. "Then we have 30 minutes to make them regret this decision." The crew moved like clockwork, preparing for a battle none of them had anticipated. Each officer had a grim expression, but they were all unified by a singular purpose: to survive, and to show the galaxy that humanity would not bow to oppression. "Are we ready for this?" Talon asked, his voice softer this time, laced with a touch of doubt. Yaga's hand brushed the cold surface of the command console, her fingers tracing the same path over and over as though it could ground her. "Are you, Commander?" Talon met her gaze, his jaw set. "Ready as we'll ever be." Yaga smiled, a rare expression from someone who'd spent her career negotiating peace. Her hands were stained with blood now, the blood of those who would have died if she hadn't made this decision. She turned back to the forward window, staring out into the vast emptiness. The stars seemed so far away, almost mocking in their cold indifference. "What's the plan?" Talon asked. "We hit them fast and hard," Yaga said, her voice steady despite the fire burning within her. "The Council is overconfident. Their arrogance will be their downfall." "They're not fools," Talon replied. "They'll be expecting us. They know we're desperate." Yaga nodded, acknowledging the truth in his words. "They may know we're desperate, but they don't understand the depth of it. The Council doesn't know humanity like I do." "You know that how?" Talon pressed, his brow furrowed in confusion. Yaga turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "Because when we are backed into a corner, we don't just fight, we create miracles." Talon didn't reply, but his eyes flickered with something, doubt or admiration, she couldn't tell. Either way, it didn't matter. He would follow her into the fire. The ship's artificial gravity shifted slightly, the subtle change unnoticed by most, but Yaga felt the heaviness of the moment press into her chest. There was no turning back. The galaxy had underestimated humanity for the last time. "Prepare to jump," she ordered, her voice firm. "We'll land on their outer rim before their patrols can react. We'll have seconds, Commander. Seconds to cripple their ability to communicate before they know we're here." Talon stepped away, barking orders. "All crew to battle stations. I want full stealth mode and a course set for the far side of the asteroid belt." Yaga moved to her seat, sinking into the chair as the ship hummed in sync with her heartbeat. The crew sprang into motion, but her mind was elsewhere, on Earth, on the families and people who had placed their trust in her, in humanity as a whole. They had all depended on diplomacy, on her promise of peace. Now, she had to break that promise to save them. The countdown began, and in the silence that followed, a weight seemed to fall across the entire bridge. Everyone knew what was at stake, but no one spoke it aloud. Yaga had made the first move, and now they were all locked into this dangerous game of survival. 10 seconds, Talon's voice was sharp. The tension in the room was palpable, like the air before a storm. Every breath felt like a challenge. "Stand ready," Yaga murmured, her eyes narrowing. "When the countdown hits 0, we show them what happens when you betray humanity." The ship lurched suddenly, the jolt from the warp jump rippling through every crew member's body. The stars outside the viewport flickered and stretched as the ship tore through the fabric of space. In a split second, they emerged on the other side, right in the heart of the asteroid belt, just as planned. "Now," Yaga said, her voice carrying authority and certainty, as if this was merely the first step of a much larger plan. "Now we make them bleed." The outer defenses of the Council's fleet were still light years away, but Yaga had already thought several moves ahead. The first few moments were critical. If they failed, humanity would be lost. As the crew carried out their orders, Yaga's thoughts briefly flashed back to the early days of diplomacy, when she'd stood in council halls, advocating for peace, convinced that humanity had a place in the galaxy. That vision now seemed naive. The council's betrayal had shattered that illusion. "Commander," Yaga's voice was low, but it carried across the tense bridge. "Prepare for immediate launch. I want those comms down in 5 minutes. Their fleet won't know what hit them." Talon's nod was swift, his face a mask of determination. 5 minutes, he repeated, the weight of the mission clear in his eyes. They would either succeed or perish. Yaga knew the risks, but one thing was certain, there was no going back. The ship's hull groaned as the Valkyrie raced toward its target, hurtling through the asteroid field at breakneck speed. The crew moved with precision, every moment weighted with urgency. Time was slipping away, and the fate of humanity rested on the razor's edge. "Ready, Commander," the weapons officer called, his voice tense but focused. Yaga stood at the helm, her eyes fixed on the communications array as it blinked, awaiting her command. The tension was palpable in the bridge, thick enough to feel in the air. Her every breath seemed louder than the hum of the ship. The stakes had never been higher. "Fire on my mark," Yaga ordered. The plan had been set in motion, an all-out assault to cripple the Galactic Council's communications, to silence their command structure long enough to throw them into disarray. The first volley of missiles would target the outer defenses of their lead fleet, softening them up before they hit the heart of the enemy. Talon's voice cut through the silence, though his tone was calm. "Approaching the outer perimeter of their fleet. We'll have less than 2 minutes before they detect our presence." Yaga's heart pounded against her ribs. 2 minutes. It was all they had. Her mind raced through the possibilities. What if they were too late? What if the council had anticipated this? It didn't matter now. There was no turning back. "Mark," she said, and the words felt like a declaration of war. The weapons officer's fingers flew across the controls. Outside, in the cold vacuum of space, the Valkyrie unleashed its payload in a flurry of bright, destructive energy. A series of explosions lit up the distant shadows of the asteroid field, sending shockwaves through the surrounding void. The first wave hit its mark. Enemy ships scattered, their formation splintering into chaos. But Yaga's heart didn't settle. The battle was far from over. "Recalculating, Madam Ambassador," the navigator said. "They're pulling in reinforcements from their rear guard." Yaga's mind spun. They had expected retaliation, but not this fast. The council had more than enough firepower to wipe them out in an instant. "We need to buy more time," she said, her voice hardening. "Initiate evasive maneuvers. Commander Talon, get ready to deploy our decoys." Talon's eyes flashed. "You're thinking of buying time by luring them into an ambush?" Yaga nodded. "We need them to waste their resources on the decoys, give our forces a chance to regroup." "I don't like it," Talon muttered, his gaze flickering toward the nearby tactical display. "If they find out it's a ruse." "They will," she said, her words carrying the weight of reality. "But by then, they'll be too scattered to make a proper counterattack. It's our only chance." The ship lurched as the decoys were deployed, sending a flurry of false readings across the enemy sensors. For a moment, the Valkyrie became one with the chaos, a ghost in the storm. But that ghost wouldn't last. The reinforcements were coming. Fast. "On my mark," Yaga said, leaning forward. She could almost hear the heartbeat of the ship as she waited for the critical moment. The second wave hit. A barrage of plasma fire streaked through the space where the Valkyrie had been mere moments ago. The ship's shields flared with the impact, flickering, but holding for now. Yaga gripped the console, her knuckles white. "Hold it together," she muttered under her breath. "Damage report," Talon called. "Minimal for now," the officer at the rear replied. "We've taken some hits to the outer plating, but the shields are holding." Yaga exhaled a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. "Good. Keep it that way." Talon turned to her, eyes sharp. "You're gambling with our lives." Yaga didn't flinch. Sometimes the only way to win is to risk everything. Another volley of fire, more intense this time, hammered at the Valkyrie's shields. The ship shuddered violently, and a harsh alarm blared through the bridge, signaling that they had breached the perimeter of the Council's defensive net. "Now, Talon," Yaga said, her voice like steel. "Deploy the countermeasures." With a nod, Talon activated the ship's cloaking technology. The sudden shift in the environment was palpable, the hum of the engines seemed to fade, and the sensation of being visible to the enemy lessened. For a moment, the Valkyrie became little more than a shadow, slipping through the cracks in the chaos. It wasn't enough. The enemy wasn't fooled. Within seconds, enemy fighters broke off from their formation and began hunting the ship like a pack of wolves. "We need to get to the other side of the field, fast," Yaga said, her voice growing taut. "If we make it, we can jump out of their reach." The ship surged forward, evading the incoming attacks with barely a hair's breadth of safety. The weapons officer fired back, returning enough fire to keep the enemy at bay, but their enemies weren't slowing down. They were learning. Yaga's heart raced as the seconds stretched on, the urgency of the mission suffocating her thoughts. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about sending a message. A message the Council would never forget. "We need to buy another minute," she said, turning to Talon. "Do it. Now." He met her gaze, and this time, the respect in his eyes was unmistakable. "On it." Talon's command rang out as the Valkyrie darted through the field, weaving between the asteroids and outmaneuvering the incoming fire. The seconds passed slowly, and Yaga could feel the pulse of her people, of humanity, beating through the ship. It wasn't over yet. But it would be soon. And when it was, they would make their stand. The deep hum of the Valkyrie's engines reverberated through the hull as the ship flew through the asteroid field, the stars above nothing but streaks of light. The crew was battered, their energy and morale fraying at the edges, but they had one objective: to hit the heart of the Council's fleet, to send a message that would echo through the galaxy for generations. They were close. Too close. "Shields are at 30%, the weapons officer reported, his voice strained. "Hull integrity is holding, but barely." Yaga's hand gripped the command chair, knuckles white. The fight had already taken a toll on them, but she had no choice now. They had come this far. "We're almost at the critical point," Talon said, voice cool but intense. His eyes never left the star system's core, where the Council's main fleet waited like a behemoth, unaware of the storm that was about to be unleashed upon them. "Good. Prepare to initiate the final phase," Yaga said, her tone cutting through the tension like a knife. Talon nodded, but the worry was there in the slight tightness of his jaw. "If we can't break through their defenses now, there's nothing we can do." "We will," Yaga said, turning to face him. "We've already made them bleed. Now we finish it." The crew fell into a hushed silence as they approached the heart of the enemy's defenses. The sensors pinged loudly as enemy ships began to converge, their formations twisting into something far more dangerous. Yaga's heart pounded in her chest, but her mind was calm. She could see it all. The grand strategy that would win or lose them this battle. The odds were still stacked against them, but humanity wasn't built on odds. "Deploy the cloaking tech," Yaga commanded, voice steady. "We're going to give them a real reason to fear us." A shudder ran through the ship as the cloak engaged. The stars around them blurred into a swirling haze of light and shadow. For the moment, they would be ghosts, unseen, undetectable. The Valkyrie had become a predator in the dark, and it was about to strike. "Deploy the decoys," Talon ordered, his fingers flying over the console. Hundreds of tiny drones shot out from the ship, scattering into the field like seeds in the wind. The drones emitted false signals, each one designed to mimic the ship's energy signature perfectly. It was the only chance they had to distract the approaching enemy fleets long enough for their final move. "Enemy sensors are confused," the navigation officer called out. "They're pulling back to reevaluate. We have a small window." Yaga nodded. "Now, let's finish this. Take us in." The Valkyrie surged forward, its cloak shimmering faintly as it cut through the cloud of asteroids, slicing a path through the chaos. They were close now. So close. The enemy, still trying to regain control, had begun to split up, chasing shadows. But Yaga had something else in mind. Target their command ship. The one in the center, Yaga ordered. We take down the leadership, and the rest of the fleet will fall apart. The weapons officer acknowledged, and with a final, deep breath, the crew braced themselves. A massive shot rang out from the ship's cannons, sending a stream of blinding energy toward the heart of the Council's command ship. For a split second, everything stopped. The void outside the ship seemed to hold its breath. Then, the explosion. A shockwave rippled outward, shaking the Valkyrie to its core. The command ship, the symbol of the Council's dominance, fractured and crumbled under the force of the strike. For a moment, the galaxy's most powerful fleet was reduced to chaos and confusion. Direct hit, Talon said, his voice tinged with disbelief. But their victory was short-lived. They're retaliating, the weapons officer shouted. A fresh wave of enemy ships, more than they had anticipated, launched forward, furious and vengeful. It was a counterattack designed to annihilate them in one fell swoop. We're too exposed, the navigator said, voice tight. Shields are failing. Not for long, Yaga replied, standing from her chair. This is it. We make our stand here. Talon turned to her, his expression grim. We can't win this, Yaga. Not like this. Then we'll die like we lived, Yaga interrupted, her voice unwavering. On our terms. Fighting for what matters. She could see it, the fire in her crew's eyes. They understood. They didn't need to be told. Yaga turned to face the view screen, her eyes locking onto the approaching enemy fleet. Full speed ahead, she ordered. We die fighting, and we make sure they know who did it. The ship lurched as the engines roared to life. Talon's voice, usually calm and collected, was now laced with an emotion that mirrored Yaga's own. Lock in the coordinates, Talon said, gritting his teeth. We make them regret underestimating humanity. The stars outside blurred into streaks of light as the Valkyrie shot forward. The weapons officer fired the remaining cannons, each blast ringing like a death knell, but they knew this wasn't about victory anymore. It was about sending a message. Humanity would never be forgotten. And they would never be silenced.